Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so today I'm bringing you another round from the Xeon City Gym City Championship from down in Cornwall in the UK. This is an expanded format tournament, not like I said on the first video, and it is from black and white all the way through to breakthrough. It's 50 minutes, best of 3, so sit back, grab yourself a nice cold beverage, and enjoy a nice game from the Truro City Championship. Best of 3, 50 minutes, expanded, black and white to breakthrough. And of course, I should say a massive thank you to all who helped to run that tournament, the Sidden family. Lovely, lovely people, lovely, lovely tournament, and they made it very, very easy for me to record indeed. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so we've got Chris on the left. He is going to be playing Toad Bats, and we have Josh on the right. He is going to be playing Fighting Bats. Lots of bats running around here. Now, the interesting thing is that as we're in Expanded, everybody's playing the Phantom Forces Zubat, which has free retreat if there's no energy attached to it. It also has 40 HP, not 50. Now, this is particularly interesting for Chris. Chris has gone first. Oh, it gets his turn 1. He's got rid of a Super Scoop Up and something else, but as we can see, Josh has a Sycamore in hand. So although that turn 1 gets this, make your opponent reveal their hand, shuffle in all the item cards, and you draw as many cards as they shuffled in. Although that is often a very good thing to do, we can see because Josh has opened Sycamore, it's less of an issue. But he got rid of an Ultra Ball for it, could have been gone for a Shaman there. So it is absolutely slowed Josh down here. What Josh would want to do there is probably play a Shaman. It's all a moot point. We see a Dedenne going down there, and we see a Seismitoad going down. Now, Chris, he wanted a second Zubat there. Reason is, he gets a second Zubat, and if he gets 2 Golbats next turn, he can kill Josh's Zubat, guaranteed, because Josh can't evolve until after Chris has evolved. Less of an issue now because Chris only has 1 Zubat, so the maximum amount of bat damage he can do is put down 1 Golbat and essentially spread 20 damage using the Golbat. So Josh here, he hasn't got much at all. What he can do is attach to the Hawlucha, and he can use that to do 60 damage to the Seismitoad. It's basically the only play he had there. Fighting Stadium will mean it goes up to 80 damage, and Hawlucha can be pretty good against Seismitoad. For 1 fighting energy, it does 60 damage to any EX, and obviously you can use things like Strong Energy, Muscle Band, Fighting Stadium to increase the amount of energy you do with that. And, you know, Toad can struggle to KO the Hawlucha. Now, we see an Ultra Ball coming down here, getting rid of, is that a Crobat? And an AZ maybe? I can't quite see, I'm afraid, ladies and gentlemen. Chris will need to do 70 damage to KO the Hawlucha, but with a DCE, Muscle Band, and a Golbat, he will get to the 70 and KO the Hawlucha. And like so many people in this format at the moment, that Ultra Ball goes to get a Shaman out. Shaman's got that wonderful setup ability that allowed you to draw until you got 6 cards in your hand. And it just helps decks to run smoother. It's one of the reasons why people moan less about supporter droughts nowadays. And now here comes a Super Scoop Up. Is that a heads or a tails? It looks like it was a tails. Presumably was trying to pick up the Shaman there so he could use that setup ability again. But 80 damage on turn 1 is not the end of the world. Now, Chris didn't attach a DCE last turn. If he had one, he shouldn't have attached it. Because these bats decks, the fighting bats, etc., they tend to play 2 enhanced hammer to get rid of those, to get rid of DCEs or things of that nature. So always best not to play it until you have to. So Chris there, he gets the damage on the Hawlucha. Now he hit tails on the Super Scoop Up. Had he hit a head, he would have been able to put the Zubat in the active, evolve it into the Golbat, who of course has free retreat, and then he could have basically just completely healed that Seismitoad. But it's all a moot point. He hit a tails. Now, really bad thing about that, of course, is that Seismitoad is down to 100 HP left. That means that a Strong Energy or a Muscle Band, and that Hawlucha is getting a KO next turn. Heck, even a Golbat and a Muscle Band, or even a Golbat would do instead of the Muscle Band or the Strong Energy. You don't really want to ever put 2 energy on a Hawlucha. He can attack for 1. You just don't want that second energy on there. It ends up basically being a waste of an attachment. Now, we see an end there from Chris. That makes you both players shuffle their hand into their deck, draw as many cards as they have prizes remaining. And the reality is here that neither player has taken a prize, so they both just get a nice hand refresh. Now, Chris has the DCE there. If he's got the Muscle Band, it's worth taking a KO here. The issue for Chris is going to be if he doesn't have the Muscle Band. If he doesn't have the Muscle Band, that means he doesn't have a KO. Now, if he doesn't use Seismitoad's Quaking Punch, 30 damage for a double colorless energy, then he's not going to Trainer Lock or Item Lock Josh. So he wants to put the DCE and use Quaking Punch so that Josh can't use items on his subsequent turn. The problem with that is, if he doesn't have the Muscle Band, he doesn't get a KO. Josh needs either a Strong Energy or a Golbat. He is Trainer Locked, so Item Locked, so the Muscle Band won't do. And he's got the Golbat in hand, so Josh has got the KO on the Seismitoad. He is going to go 2 prizes up here, and Chris now knows that. Oh, but Josh had no other play. Literally just attacked and went. Now, if he's got a Crobat here, he can actually knock out the Hawlucha without attacking. Crobat's got the ability that allows you to just drop 3 damage counters onto a Pokemon. But otherwise, he'd need a DCE would get the KO with Mewtwo here. I mean, an N would be quite good because Josh has got a pretty big, and there is the N. I was going to say, Josh has got a pretty big hand. He's just taken 2 cards from his prizes. And now, whereas Chris will get 6 cards off the N, Josh will only get 4. And this is what expanded, which is, of course, what this is. This is what expanded tournaments have nowadays that standard tournaments don't. The ever-present threat of your opponent playing an N, and you are kind of sitting there crying while you draw nothing. So we shall see if Josh is able to draw out of it. It means it's kind of fair in some ways. It's a great equalizer. It means that you can be in a position where you're losing by a mile because your opponent's just had a better start than you. Then you can go ahead and draw, your N your opponent down, and then start mounting a comeback, which, that's pretty much lost from the standard format as we have it at the moment. We've got cards like Ace Trainer that if you're behind, make your opponent shuffle their hand in and get free, but it's not the same by any stretch. Now, Chris did get a DCE for the Mewtwo off of that, so he's going to be able to retreat the Golbat, and he's going to be able to get the KO with the Mewtwo, putting the deficit down to just a single prize. And then it's going to be up to Josh. Now, Josh is going to get his trainers back now, and the question is, what's he going to do with them? If he can get another Hawlucha and start dropping down some bats, he's going to be laughing. If he can't get Hawlucha, he's going to be struggling. Now, one of the main attackers in Josh's deck... Oh, we see a Scoop Up Cyclone coming down there as the Ace spec. It's like a Super Scoop Up, but you don't have to flip a coin. We get a Zubat coming down as well, that he drew off the Shaman. Does he have anything? He's having a Sycamore there, getting rid of another Sycamore in energy and what looks like a Golbat, which of course you never want to get rid of because he's got a Zubat on the bench. One of Josh's main attackers in this deck is Lucario, 30 damage for 1 fighting energy, and then you've got your Fighting Stadium, Strong Energy, Muscle Band, that can make it do as much as 90 damage for 1 energy. And it's weak to Psychic. So Josh knows here that if he uses Lucario, not only is it weak to Mewtwo, it's also weak to Crobat. Now, what I was just about to say is, as it's in Expanded, he also has Landorus EX, and that's far better here. And down comes Landorus. 30 to the active, 30 to one of the bench Pokemon for 1 energy. Now, we see an Ultra Ball coming down here. Does he have a Crobat? Now, if he has a Crobat, he can actually take a KO here on... No, it would have to be on the Zubat on the bench. But he could take a KO here. He could do that 30 damage to the Zubat on the bench, and then the 30 bench damage from Hammerhead will KO the Zubat. So, a not unexpected turn of events here. he's going to get a cheeky prize. But it's not... And obviously, you don't want to do 60 damage to a Pokemon that's got 40 HP. However, we see a VS Seeker coming down for a Lysander there. Very clever to do it this turn because he knows that Chris plays Seismitoad. He knows there's a chance he's going to be Trainer Locked next turn, so he doesn't want to be hoping he's not Trainer Locked. He wants to be setting himself up just in case he is. Now, the reason that was a really good play, other than, of course, just taking a prize, Chris now doesn't have a Zubat on the bench. Which means he cannot evolve that Zubat into a Golbat and drop 2 damage counters onto Josh's side of the field. And that's huge. It means that he's basically taken 20 damage away from Chris's game plan. Now we see Chris has got a computer search in hand so he can get whatever he wants here. Chris is in real danger of losing this game. He's taken 1 prize, Chris has taken 3 prizes, and he's just done... what I believe is 70 damage to that active Mewtwo. What Chris wants to do is heal that Mewtwo. Now, a Scoop Up Cyclone would be amazing here, but of course you can't use a spec to search for another A spec. That would be silly. And Chris basically knows he can't go for something like a Shaman here. He knows that Josh has got a Lysandra in hand that he can use to try and pull up and KO that Shaman. Now, Shaman does have an effective HP of 130 with the fighting resistance. But even so, he doesn't really want to be risking it. Now we see a laser coming down, and this is one of the big... Oh, that's the wrong way, by the way, boys. Sleep goes to the left because L comes first. And Paralyze goes to the right because R comes first. Sorry about that. And Landorus has a heap big retreat. Oh, this will be a huge flip if he can hit heads on this. And he does. Not only does he heal the Mewtwo, not only does he get the Mewtwo out of the active, but he gets a double colorless to allow the Seismitoad to attack this turn. Landorus is weak to water. Seismitoad will now be doing 100 damage with Quaking Punch while Trainer Locking Josh. And let's not forget the poison, which is going to put him on 130 in total. Now, if he can get he wants a Zubat here. Because if he can put Josh on 130 damage with a Zubat and a Golbat on the bench, it means next turn he can get a Golbat and a Crobat and actually KO the Landorus mid-turn. Because he'll be on 130 at the end of this turn. Oh no, he doesn't even need that, sorry. Because by the end of Josh's turn, he's going to be on 160 damage because there'll be 30 more from the poison. So he's only going to need a Zubat or a Golbat. Now what he could do here is play a Crobat to do 30 damage to the Landorus, doing 160 this turn, meaning the Landorus will die at the end of Josh's turn, coming in to Chris's turn, which would be absolutely huge. And this is the advantage Chris has got here. Josh's big EX attackers are Landorus and Lucario, that are weak to Chris's EX attackers, Mewtwo and Seismitoad. Now, if Chris can get a Crobat here, that would be massive. Now, it's not the end of the world. Oh, and that's just adding insult to injury. A Head Ringer, which means that Landorus's attack costs are increased by 1, which means that he's going to need another energy just to do a Hammerhead. Now, he does wake up, but he's going to need an energy to do a Hammerhead here. So, I mean, that was a huge turn for Chris. That head's on the Super Scoop Up. I cannot say enough how much of a difference that made. Even putting that Lucario down, Josh knows there's a Mewtwo on Chris's side of the field that will hit it for weakness. Oh, that's a big play. This is a game full of big plays. Josh hits an AZ. Now he has to get rid of the strong energy to do so. He doesn't get to reuse it like Chris did with a DCE on the Mewtwo. But all of a sudden, Chris was looking at a mid-turn, assuming he could hit a Crobat next turn. Chris was looking at a mid-turn KO on the Landorus for 2 prizes, evening up the prize trade. And now Josh has instead managed to hit the Seismitoad for 70. Which means next turn, he's going to be threatening a KO? Yeah, if he can get another energy, he'll be threatening a KO. Although it would take quite a bit. Now the Crobat comes down. Now Seismitoad, remember, if I remember correctly, has a retreat cost of 3. So he's not going to just be able to retreat it as is. Now, this is where Chris's deck... he's managed to find room for both lasers and for bats. Now, I believe Josh is just playing bats here. And the advantage of that is that he can have turns like this, where he gets 30 damage off of a Crobat. Then he gets 30 damage off of a Hypnotoxic Laser. And he's got the Mewtwo ready to go. Now, he would actually have... If he can get the Seismitoad out the active, and he might have an AZ he can use here, he's got the KO. Now, there's free energy between Mewtwo and Lucario. That is 60 damage. Times 2 for the weakness is 120 damage. Plus the 30 from the Crobat is 150. Plus the 30 for the poison. Now, if he had an AZ there, I would have been a big fan of him picking up the Lucario. But I'm not 100% sure he did have an AZ in the discard pile. So maybe he never actually had a choice of doing so. But that would have been a big play. And this is just chucking big plays back and forth. Now, the other thing to remember is that maybe Chris doesn't want to get the KO on the Lucario here. Maybe Chris is content to just, end Josh down to 3 cards and just keep that trainer lock on. Lucario's poisoned. He's asleep, although it's still the wrong side. Sleep is left, SL. Paralyzed is right, PAR. So the Lucario here is asleep. Josh is going to be trainer locked, assuming Chris uses Quaking Punch. And a total of 80 damage plus sleep plus trainer lock. Not a bad position to be in. And it's going to take quite a bit for Josh to KO that Seismitoad. The trainer's mail comes down from Chris, getting him a VS Seeker for next turn. Now, just a second ago, we saw the end come down, which was a really good example of your opponent's had a better start than you, but N can help to even it out. And, it's going to take a lot for Josh to get the KO next turn. He's only hitting for 70 as it stands, which will, and that's the second time he's had a big waking up from a sleep flip. Now, that strong energy will get the KO onto the Seismitoad, because he'll then be hitting for he'll be hitting for essentially 120. It does 60 damage and allows you to draw till you got 6 in your hand. Plus the 2 strong energy is 100, plus the stadium is 120, add the 70 that he had before is 190. So maybe, and I do try and say this in most of my videos, I don't have access to the same level of information that the players in this game do. So that must be considered here. But if Chris had an AZ or a way to get an AZ, that would have been a better play last turn. As it is, he's taken 1 prize, Josh has taken 5, and now we see another N coming down from Chris here, and this is big. We know Chris is going to get the KO. Now, weirdly, usually in this situation, what you'd want to do is actually leave the Crobat in the active, put the energy on the Crobat, because Crobat Skill Dive can KO the Lucario here. 30 damage times 2 for weakness is 60. That'll put him on 160 and he'll die from poison. But Josh has only got 1 prize remaining. So if you've got 170 HP Pokemon and 130 HP Pokemon, you want the 170 in the active. Now, Josh is down to 1 card. He's going to have 2 at the beginning of his next turn. He needs to take 1 prize for the KO. Now, if Chris has a chance to evolve that Zubat, he needs to. He doesn't want a 40 HP Pokemon sitting on his bench. There we go. There is still a 70 HP Dedenne on the bench, and there's a 70 HP Golbat on the bench. Either of those could go down and give Josh the win next turn. However, he's going to need... he's going to need a Lysandra and something which is capable of doing the killing. He's got no energy on the field at this stage. Now, he's only going to have 2 cards. I mean, the perfect draw here would be a Lysandra and a Shaman. But it could well be that he only plays 2. And he might indeed have absolutely nothing here. Now, it's not enough to just have a Lysandra. And it looks like he's got 2 Pokemon in hand. It's not enough to just have a Lysandra here. Because if he plays that, well, he's not getting the KO. He's got no energy on the field. And that's a problem. Now, if he ends up with strong energy Muscle Band Lysandra, he can actually use that whole Lucha to get a one-hit KO on the Shaman. But that's a moot point for the time being. I believe Dedenne and Golbat both have a pesky 70 HP, which means he couldn't even use a Crobat Hammer, Hammerhead combination. He could have gone Golbat this turn and then Crobat Hammerhead next turn, but I'm just getting a bit kind of elaborate here. Oh, Chris hits a heads on a Super Scoop Up. Now we're rolling. There goes a Seismitoad. There goes a double colorless. And now this is where Seismitoad starts to shine. You're down by 2 prizes. Your opponent only has 1 prize left. They have just been end to 2. Oh, and an AZ as well, so that he can reuse all the bats. Oh, this is some quite clever play here. Because he gets the Crobat this turn, and he gets to bench the Zubat, and then he gets the guaranteed Golbat next turn, because he's already got it in his hand. Now this is good from Chris. Josh is going to be trainer locked. He's got a hand of 2 cards. We know he's got nothing because he didn't play anything last turn, which means not only does he have to draw into something, but the thing into which he draws has to not be trainer-based. Oh, he's got a Chorus. Oh, that's huge. That must have been his top deck. He must have... Now, that's huge. That's even better than a Juniper at this stage, because it allows him to draw 9 cards, which is massive. And Chris still has 3 prizes remaining. Now, Chris is going to be... Excuse me. Chris is going to be absolutely desperate here for an end next turn, because now Josh can use this turn, setting up an attacker to use. Oh, he's going to get a KO this turn with the skill dive on the Zubat for the win. So much for a Lysandra KO next turn. None of that is needed, ladies and gentlemen. He just is able to get the bench damage from the bat and then use Crobat skill dive to KO that Zubat. Now, I'll admit I missed that a teensy bit because in the previous turn, I had mentioned about benching the Zubat so that he has a Golbat next turn. But of course, the turn before that I mentioned leaving a Zubat on the bench would be very, very silly because it gives Josh an easier route to victory. And this is something we need to bear in mind because at the end of the day, it's very, very easy to KO a 40 HP Zubat, especially when you are playing bats. So something to bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen. And your opponent's got 1 prize left, benching a little Zubat. And I know I said to do it. Previous turn I said not to. I forgot. I feel bad. Please forgive me. So Chris gets to go first in game 2. He starts Seismitoad against Lucario and immediately gets a head ringer onto the Lucario. That means that there will be no Lucario attack next turn because Lucario is now going to need to have a 2 energy on to attack. Now, obviously, Josh can go for, and that's a fairly painful Sycamore, getting rid of a VS Seeker and an N. And that's why he attached a double colorless energy. Now, I told you in the previous game that generally you do not want to play a double colorless energy on turn 1. There's only 4 of them. They're hard to recover from the discard pile. It's pretty much only Bunnelby that can. But if you're going to have to get rid of it with Sycamore anyway, why not? Now, this is a wonderful turn 1 for Chris. He's got the DCE, he's got the Muscle Band, he's got the Laser, he's got the Verbank, he's got the Head Ringer. Chris, and he hasn't hit Tails on a Laser yet. Although, to be fair, I believe both of them last game, Josh did wake up, so that's something. We have got a situation here where... Oh, and he's even got the double Zubat, which means if Josh puts a Zubat down this turn, Chris is going to be able to double Golbat it up next turn and immediately get the KO. Josh does wake up a lot from those sleep flips, but then again, Chris does hit the sleep flips a lot, so I suppose it kind of evens out over the course of the game. Now, Josh is going to have to get that Lucario out of the active. It's going to be on 60 at the end of this turn. And with a double Golbat, Chris actually would be able to get the KO next turn. It would be on 90. Oh, no, he wouldn't, because the stadium's been changed. Fighting Stadium's down now. This will be a... Oh! Is that a Tails? Oh, like a heads for a second there. Oh, that's a scoop up Cyclone. He's going to have to play that. You don't want to waste your ace spec on turn 1 of the game, but you don't really have a choice. Now, here is the conundrum. When initially you see the Seismitoad on turn 1, you're like, well, that's a pain. At least I've got Lucario in the active. Lucario isn't weak to Seismitoad. Well, now Josh is only drawn into a Landorus. He's got the Landorus down. He's already played an energy, so there's no more energy coming down. And it looks like Josh also has to kill a VS Seeker to play a Sycamore. And that means he's got... If he's going to have an attack, if he's going to use the energy, he's got to use the Landorus. Now, Landorus is weak to Seismitoad. Now, Seismitoad is going to be hitting for 100 next turn. And there's Golbats and there's lasers. That Landorus might not be long for this world. However, he's doing 50 damage to the Seismitoad, 30 presumably to one of the Zubats on the bench. So maybe Josh can get enough damage done with it that it actually makes it worth doing it. You see his other Landorus there has already gone. Now, hypothetically, let's say Josh is able to get a big hit here. And next turn, maybe he can use an AZ, or, I mean, he's going to be Trainer Lock, so I suppose Super Scoop Up is out of the equation. And actually, that's an argument for using your ace spec nice and early if you're going to be Trainer Locked for most of the game. Maybe he can use a Hawlucha to get the KO next turn and not have to give up 2 prizes with the Landorus. I don't know is the honest answer. Now, Chris, he's going to have to use that VS Seeker for an N. He can't Sycamore here because he has to get rid of, DCEs number 2 and 3. And those DCEs are moderately important, ladies and gentlemen. You kind of need them as you go through the game. So he's not going to be able to just get rid of them. Now, you do see a Focus Sash on the Hawlucha of Josh here, but of course it's pretty much a moot point because either it only stops if the Hawlucha it only comes into effect, it only stops the killing if you would have a one-hit KO and both the bats and the laser get around it quite nicely. So yeah, we've got either a Sycamore or an N here, and as I've said, it's got to be an N. There's no way Chris can afford to use 3 DCEs on the first turn of the game. Probably don't want to refresh your opponent's hand this early, especially when you're about to Trainer Lock them, but there's no other choice. Tell me he's not going to play a Sycamore here. Now, he can put a DCE on the Shaman and either Super Scoop Up or even use Shaman's attack to, I disagree with this. I disagree with this entirely. He can use Shaman's attack to do 30 damage and get it back into the hand and get that DCE back. He's already gone through 3 DCEs. There's one where he wants it to be, but he's already taken some damage on the Seismitoad. There's one on a Pokemon he doesn't want it on, and there's one in the discard pile. It's not a good start. It's not where you want to be at this stage in the game. So the Golbat comes down, drops 20 damage onto the Hawlucha. And again, now that Focus Ash is useful. Oh, we see another head ringer on the Landorus, which means we're going to need a second energy on that Landorus in order to get an attack from Josh next turn. And he hits for 100, which means we're going to get a KO next turn. However, next turn, Chris will get a KO with the Seismitoad. This turn, Josh is going to do a bunch of damage and put another 30 on the bench. And then next turn, Josh is going to even it up. Oh, this is big. Next turn, Josh can even it up using the Hawlucha. And I thought he might go for the Landorus there. But actually, he's in a decent position. This turn, Josh does a bunch of damage. Next turn, Chris KOs a Landorus with Seismitoad, goes up 2 prizes to 0. And then on Josh's next turn, he KOs a Seismitoad with the Hawlucha, and we're drawn at 2 prizes each. Although, with a Muscle Band, Chris would be able to KO the Hawlucha with the Shaman, and get the DCE back in the process. Because Chris now, he's got one DCE in deck, and that could come back to bite him. Now the Golbat comes down, puts the Seismitoad onto 70 in total, and doesn't get the attack. He doesn't have the energy on the Landorus to get the attack. Now that's pretty big. Hawlucha, as it stands, is only hitting for 80, which will only put the Seismitoad on 150. Now, a Crobat will do the extra 30 damage and get the KO, but this now means that Josh is going to have to get the Crobat in order to do the KO. It also means that he didn't put 30 damage onto the Zubat. Had he put 30 damage onto the Zubat, he'd be threatening a KO next turn, except now he wouldn't because the Crobat goes down. Okay, a Golbat. But we have the KO on the Hawlucha with the combination of, well, 2 Golbats, 1 Crobat, 70 damage. So Chris is going 3 prizes up this turn. And he lost game 1. So he's going to want to try and go some prizes up this turn. That's going to be, I think it's fair to say that's going to be in his game plan. He needs to get a win in this. Now, the reality of 15 minutes best of 3 is that if he wins this turn, we're probably headed to a draw. But both these decks are fairly evenly matched, so a draw from 2 good players playing similar evenly matched decks is probably about what we would expect. Now Chris is already starting to set up with that Mewtwo on the bench. He's got an energy on the Mewtwo because he's looked at Josh's side of the field. He's identified that Josh is going to probably end up going Lucario. We know that one Landorus has been discarded early in the game. We know that one Landorus has just been KO'd. I don't know how many Landorus Josh plays, but it's probably fair to assume it's 2, maybe 3 at the most. With 2 already down, it means he's going to be going into Lucario, which means that Chris is now going to be transitioning into Mewtwo. Chris really in this game, and he's been doing it very well so far, he needs to be reacting to what Josh is doing. He needs to be looking at the EXs being played by Josh and having the correct countermeasure in place. And he's got countermeasures. So as long as he uses them properly, he'll be absolutely fine. Now, Josh needs a KO here, and he's probably going to get the KO. Now, he needs to do 110 damage. Oh, no, it's actually probably not. That Lucario, as it stands, is only going to be doing 70, which means he'll be 40 damage short, and he is trainer locked, remember. When he starts attacking with that Lucario, the Mewtwo's coming up. But remember, Chris has only got 1 DCE in the deck, which is why he has to plan a little bit ahead for that Mewtwo. Now we can put the Seismitoad on 160. Meaning that 1 bat next turn will get the KO. But maybe Chris hits an AZ, maybe he's already played one, so a VS Seeker for an AZ would do here, and he gets to deny the prizes. That would be huge. He'd lose a DCE, but he's going to lose a DCE anyway. Oh, and he's got a computer search there, so he can get that Seismitoad fixed if he wants to. It is an option. Now, he's got Laser there. I don't know if he's got a Verbank. Now, Mewtwo is effectively doing 40 damage for every energy. So he needs 5 energy or 4 energy Laser Verbank. And there's already 2 on the field. So, oh, okay. Now he's going to need 4 energy if he puts the damage onto the Lucario. So a DCE here and a way to get the Seismitoad out the active would be a KO. Lucario's down to 160. Oh, now, okay. So he's basically going to be relying here on... He's going to have to get a Sycamore or something like that, which means he's going to be relying on hitting heads on a Super Scoop Up next turn. Because if he doesn't hit heads on a Super Scoop Up, a Crobat is going to allow Josh to KO that Seismitoad mid-turn. And anytime you can get a KO in the middle of a turn is always big. It's always incredibly useful. I think it's going to help. I think it's fair to say it's going to help quite nicely indeed. So, I mean, Chris needs an energy and a way to get the Seismitoad out of the active. Now, there should be a high 5 here, or has that convention already died? Now, he's got the DCE and he's got a laser. Okay, no way to get the Seismitoad out of the active. Now, this is potentially a problem. Not a huge problem. He's still in a good position here, and he gets an extra Seismitoad, so we can carry on with that. And now he puts a DCE on the Seismitoad. And that's it. That's all his DCEs now. He is out of DCEs for the game. Now here comes a laser. A heads here will be huge. And of course it's a heads. He's hit heads and they've turned it the wrong way every single time. However, Josh has woken up every single time. So maybe it won't be all that big a deal. Could this be... Oh, and there we go. Does that dice ever come up tails? They need to be using that one for the Super Scoop Up. So Josh here, he's going to get a KO. Now the ideal here is that he gets a Crobat. Oh, and there we go. Now he gets the KO. He takes 2 prizes and he gets a free shot at whatever comes up. And he's only taking 10 damage per turn from the laser. I believe he's only on... Is it 40, 60? He's not on much anyway. He's on 18 total. Now, that first attack will KO that Crobat. It goes through resistance, as I got wrong on a previous video. So 30 damage, plus 20 for the strong energy, plus... Oh, no, sorry. He's going to need... No, it won't. It'll only do 50. I don't think that's a KO. No, it's only going to do 60. It will do 60 damage, minus 20 for the resistance, plus 20 for the strong energy. It's only the first attack that goes through resistance. So you can do 50 with the first attack or 60 with the second. Either way, it wasn't a KO. Chris gets to free retreat, and presumably at some point it's either going to become a Crobat or it's going to be picked up using AZ or Super Scoop Up. And now we see the whole thing going round again. Chris gets a Seismitoad in the active, and the Lucario is still poisoned. Oh, and another VS Seeker go. Oh, 2 VS. Oh, I don't like that much at all. He just sycamored 2 VS Seekers. He is going to be running very low of supporters in the late game. Now, maybe he thinks he's in a good enough position where he doesn't need it, but he's already out of DCEs at this stage. He risks the late game with no DCEs, with no supporters. He is risking a very dodgy late game here. But he's already taken 3 prizes, and he's got a Lucario on the verge of being killed opposite him. So maybe, and I can't fault him for this, maybe Chris is thinking, you know what? I'm going to win this game by going aggressively. So I don't mind getting rid of my VSC, because I don't mind getting rid of my DCEs. I'm in a good position. I am winning this game, so actually I'm happy to sit here and just go pretty damn aggressively, because I think it's going to work out for me in the long run, and he could well be right. Now, if he wins this game, we are headed to a depressing draw, but, you know, because at this stage, I don't know exactly how much has gone by, but, I mean, the first game took about 25 minutes. You might have seen that there was a very brief pause as we switched from one game to the other while I had to pause the recording. So the first game took about 25 minutes, and we're a few minutes into this one, and it's 50 minutes best of 3. So, yeah, it's not looking good for having a resolution if Chris wins this game. Now, he gets the Crobat, and I don't know exactly how much he's up to here. Is that 130? If it is 130, then he's got the KO here. Because Seismitoad will do 30, Poison will do 30 between turns. A third dice should signify it's at least 130. 60, 60, and then at least 10. So it looks like we're getting a KO here from the Seismitoad, so he doesn't need the Mewtwo. And this is going to be big. Getting a KO with a Seismitoad, going down to 1 prize, keeping the trainer lock going. And I don't really see any way Josh wins this. Josh, he has none of his EXs down, and it's just not looking good. Now, we would expect Chris to win this game. I mean, they're pretty evenly matched decks, don't get me wrong. But Chris has the ability to hit for weakness and to block trainers, whereas Josh doesn't. Now, Josh gets to big damage more easily. Oh, we see 80 damage there from the Hawlucha. Laser Muscle Band will end this. Or Muscle Band Energy on the Mewtwo. Or Crobat Laser Muscle... or Crobat Laser... or Muscle Band Crobat. Now there goes the Muscle Band. So Crobat or Laser will end the game here and give Chris the win in Game 2 and lead us to an almost inevitable draw. So this is looking isn't looking good for Chris. Now, like I say, Josh can, with the fighting deck, he can come out and get, Landorus with Strong Energy, Muscle Band, and Fighting Stadium, do 90 to an EX and 30 to the bench. Against most decks, I mean, this is, I suppose, the difference between the decks. Josh can do big damage for 1 energy and really get going quickly. Chris has sacrificed a bit of that, but he's got the trainer lock, and in this matchup, because the Mewtwo there is really more just a tech to do big damage late game. It is more about the Seismitoad. In this matchup, Chris is able to use the Mewtwo or the Seismitoad to hit the relevant EX, whatever Josh has chosen to use in this game, for weakness, and really put a lot of pressure on Josh. And it's to Josh's credit, he was able to win game 1. He is, and we've seen this matchup on my channel before, Josh is at a disadvantage here, but we saw in game 1, he plays carefully, he uses his bats effectively, he uses his EXs at the right time, he picks them up at every opportunity, and he's able to eke out a win. This game too is more similar to how we would expect this matchup to go on a game-to-game basis. And if it goes all the way, my money will be on Chris. But it's not going to go all the way. Josh can win the matchup by winning this game, but at this stage, I really don't see that happening, which means that the only possible outcome here, assuming Chris wins, is going to be either a draw, outcomes I should say, and if it's not a draw, then we're going to have one player who starts Zubat and draws nothing, and the other player gets like a turn 1 win. Otherwise, both players are going to bench a couple of EXs, and we're going to run out of time. Both of these games look to be taking, 20 minutes plus. We're going to have maybe 5 minutes. Now, there is a possibility that this game doesn't finish, and if the game doesn't finish, then Josh wins. Because if the game doesn't finish in Swiss, it's not like Top Cut, where if you take 4 prizes, a game counts. Game only counts in Swiss if the game finishes. If this game doesn't finish, this game doesn't count, Josh wins the match. Of course, as soon as time's called, Chris has a minimum of 2 turns. Oh, there we go. There's Lysandra for the win. I was going to say I would be shocked if Chris didn't find a way in those 2 turns to get the win. But he does. And now we are headed into a draw. And that is inevitable, ladies and gentlemen. It was really the only way this game was ever going to finish. I'm sorry if that's a little bit sad, a little bit defeatist. It's not. Like I say, somebody could have drawn dead. Or indeed, Chris could have used the advantage. But it's not that much of an advantage. And what we've seen here really is, and it's one of the reasons I really enjoyed commentating this particular game, what we've seen is a really good example of how this matchup can go. Game 1, we saw Josh in a position where he was able to use his EXs, do a bit of healing and minimize the impact of the weakness, and get him. And it wasn't like skin of his teeth. It was a moderately convincing win. Game 2, Chris was able to counter the weaknesses of Josh's deck, and I think, to be honest, pretty much saunter to a fairly straightforward victory. And I don't think it's anything that Josh did in Game 2. I just think that in Game 2, Chris's deck did what Chris's deck does. Josh brings up Landorus, Chris brings up Seismitoad. Now, there was a small piece of bad luck on Josh's part in Game 1. Had Josh started Landorus and Landorus gets poisoned, Chris is able to heal the Landorus and put a Lucario up, rather than starting Lucario, healing Lucario, putting a Landorus in the active, and then having to take the hit for weakness, which of course he did. And we see a mulligan from Chris here, so Josh is going to get an extra card with which to begin his turn. But as long as both players bench a few Pokemon here, I don't see this ending any way other than a draw. I should take this opportunity to thank the lovely people at Xeon City Gym down in Truro, especially the Sidon family, Max and Sarah and children, who not only did they allow me to record, not only did they make it incredibly easy and give me a table off to the side of its own plug socket, but it was just a really lovely tournament, and I will certainly be going back there in future if I can. And of course, thank you to Josh and to Chris for agreeing to be on stream. I know that by going to Pokemon tournaments, you do impliedly agree to be recorded, but I think that's probably officially by Pokemon, and as much as I would love it to be the case, I am not an official Pokemon commentator. And I would love to finish that up by saying yet, But, yeah, you never know. Maybe one day. Maybe you're watching this video in like 2 years' time, and I am an official Pokemon commentator. That would be amazing. If you are, stick a comment down in the comments. I believe I have gone into daydream territory, because I assure you at this stage, it's, well, if it's on the cards, nobody's told me. So as it is, they've agreed to be on stream. They are lovely people, and I thank them very much for it. Pokemon can record you. I don't think I can force you. But no one's actually, I don't think anyone's ever said no to being recorded, which just makes them awesome. Certainly in this tournament, I recorded every game that I wanted to. Now, Chris has had a bad start this game. You do not want to start Jirachi. You really don't want to start Jirachi. Not only because he's opposite a Hawlucha, and that Hawlucha, strong energy, fighting stadium, 100 damage. That's enough to KO a Jirachi with a non-EX for 1 energy. Now, what Josh is going to want to do, and I don't think he's done it. Oh, that's silly. He should have retreated the Hawlucha. He really should have retreated that Hawlucha. Oh, and time's been called, and it's a draw. It looks like. No. He really should have retreated that Hawlucha. Now, we know it's not happening because Chris has attached the DCE. But if Chris hits a Super Scoop Up or an AZ, he can go, and I know it's quite a bit to ask for, but for instance, Mewtwo DCE Muscle Band, Mewtwo DCE Laser, Seismitoad DCE Muscle Band Laser, Seismitoad Muscle Band, DCE Verbank Laser wouldn't quite do it. There are many ways he can KO that Hawlucha. Chris needs that, Josh needs that Hawlucha in the active. Retreat the Hawlucha, it's got free retreat for the Zubat. Next turn, you can hopefully get a Golbat. Oh no, the Zubat has free retreat because of his ability. No, sorry, Josh did say he wanted me to point out any misplays he made. Sorry, Josh, that was a silly play. Now, you've gotten away with it because you ain't getting killed by that Jirachi. But there was a situation here where Chris, or a possibility, a hypothetical, where Chris gets a good opening hand, KOs a Hawlucha, and you've lost a really good opportunity for an easy KO on that Jirachi. Even if Chris gets a Jirachi out of the active, you can hit a Lysandra next turn. So, no, you... I talked about this on my previous video, leaving Pokemon in the active. And I've seen this a lot with players. People don't often, or at least they don't always, think about what they need to consider in terms of leaving Pokemon in the active. Sometimes you need to be a little more careful. Now, Chris has drawn a lot of cards this turn. I don't think he's double supported. Let's assume not. He's still going, bless him. And actually right now he's going to be thinking about what to leave in the active, although Zubat. Just Zubat. It's nice and simple. That Fighting Stadium going isn't the end of the world because Hawlucha just needs a Golbat or a Muscle Band to get the KO. So it's or another Fighting Stadium. It's not the biggest deal in the world that's gone. The heads, and might I point out, Chris has hit heads on every laser this game. That will have a little more of an impact. So Chris here, presumably he's going to go for a Seismitoad here, although he might get a Shaman to try and draw some more cards. No, he's gone Seismitoad. And Chris also wants to leave the Zubat in the active. Hawlucha can't attack Zubat. So now there is also a possibility here that Josh is able to get a Muscle Band Fighting Stadium Lysandra and kill the Shaman. So, you know, there's actually 2 easy EX KOs on the board for Josh here, which is, in a long game, that's really good. Both of those EXs can be, to be honest, fairly easily KO'd using Hawlucha. Now, the other reason the Zubat should have been in the active, if Zubat gets put asleep with Laser, you don't have to rely on the flip, although Josh has woken up every single time, which is probably fair given that Chris has flipped heads on sleep every single time. If the Zubat's in the active and asleep, you can just use a Golbat and evolve him up as he's just done, and then that will get around the sleep. Oh, this is not as fun as the first 2 games. And there we come with an N. Clearly not what Josh was looking for there. Although, Muscle Band Energy, he can get the KO on that Zubat with his Golbat. Zubat's got 40 HP, he's got 20 HP remaining. Golbat does 10 damage to all the Pokemon on your opponent's side of the field. Stick a Muscle Band, it becomes 30 to the active. Then you're rolling. So there is a possibility of a KO here. He's got the energy. Does he have the Muscle Band? And he would also do 10 damage to the Jirachi. Oh! Now that's not actually going to be a KO though. That's only going to do 10 damage because Hammerhead does 30 and Zubat resists fighting. So it's not actually going to get the KO. Again, he would need a Muscle Band here. I don't think that's a KO. I need to just double check that Zubat's got a resistance to fighting. I assumed it did. Most Zubats do. Because Zubat's got 40 HP, he had 20 from these Golbat drop. So in theory, the Landorus Fighting Stadium obviously only works on EXs. There's no strong energy or muscle bands there. So what all that should have done was 10 damage. Let me just double check the Zubat's resistance here. I'm pretty sure it does. I know I think it's a Primal Clash one that everybody plays has a resistance to fighting. Which you'll have to... Oh, the Plasma... I don't know. It does have... No. Excuse me, I'm looking at the Phantom Forces one that everybody plays. Now, this is the Plasma Storm Zubat. And it does have resistance to fighting, as I said. So, that wasn't a KO on the Zubat. The Zubat should have taken 20 damage from the Golbat. And then the Hammerhead does 30. Reduced down to 10 for the resistance. And it should only have done 10 damage, putting it on 30 in total. But it's very easy to miss these things when you're in the middle of a game. Especially when you're in a situation where you're in game 3 and you're both desperately trying to see if you can pull out a win. And let's not forget that Josh plays Lucario in his deck. And Lucario's got a 30 damage attack, which does go through resistance. So it's very easy to get confused. I honestly don't think it's going to make a big difference. Oh, and if you missed it, and this might shock you, he played a laser, hit a heads, and then they turned Landorus the wrong way round. I know, I was shocked too. I wonder if Josh is going to hit heads on the sleep flip. Oh my god, what a shock. Every game in this entire series, Chris has hit heads on laser, and Josh has hit heads on sleep. Every single time. Although they often become moot, because Josh does have a habit of hitting something like AZ or Super Scoop Up just as it's about to happen. And we see an Ultra Ball coming down for a Shaman for 6. Because that Shaman is in the active. Now, Josh is going to have a KO on the Shaman here. Because he does 60 damage, plus the 80 for, and time's been called, and it's a draw. Shocking. Thank you to Xeon City Gym. Thank you to both of these people. Like, comment, and subscribe. You know how YouTube works. Thank you very much for watching. Look after yourselves till next time. My name is Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio. Go on, like it. Like it.